Hey everyone, Joe Pellegrino Jr. from Robbins Pellegrino, a business brokerage firm. On today's recording, Chandler and I specifically talked about the fuel industry. We've really been honing in on specific industries to spotlight. We happen to be specialists in fuel related assets. And so we talked about everything from electric vehicles, what the pitfalls are in transactions associated with these assets, what buyers are looking for, what stations are worth these days, what kind of multiple they're going for. You're not going to want to miss it. It's a really great conversation. Enjoy. So we want to shed light on specific industries and kind of spotlight and highlight industries that we particularly have specialization in, and ultimately be able to provide resources for business owners that sort of live in that environment, live in that industry, in that space. And that's really the purpose of our conversation today. So today we will specifically be talking about the fuel industry, fuel and related assets. Chandler, you know a little bit about that, huh?
Yeah, just a smidge. Been my bread and butter for a few years now. Yep.
Yeah. We've talked about this so many times, but Chandler, you're really one of the few guys in the country that is really highly specialized in this type of transaction.
Yeah, there's only a handful of us that I would say that actually know what they're doing and qualified to help someone in that process. There are quite a few, several. If you just go and kind of scrape the internet, you'll see someone selling a gas station. They may be a residential realtor that's trying to help their friend out. They may be a commercial real estate agent that is dabbling in business brokering and their best friend had a gas station and they may do a one-off or two-off. But there are very few of us that eat, live, and breathe fuel. And even inside that small network I don't know, I'd say at tops there's probably 20 of us. And there's only two or three of us that actually I would say are worth their salt, meaning they know how to value the business. They know how to look at fuel related assets and they know how to move it forward depending on price and have actual networks, not just throwing a shotgun approach and trying to sell it on the internet, right?
Yeah.
So,
No, that's interesting because um, it's not just about your network. It's about your specific industry focused expertise. And I could see that how someone who's a business broker that might have a contact or a friend that's looking to sell their gas station, they would look at that as just another business to sell, right? But there's so many intricacies involved in this. Would you tell us a little bit about what makes the fuel industry so specialized from that perspective?
sure, I think there's just so many key pieces. So, oftentimes I like to start and just kind of use this illustration. If you're driving down the road and you pass a gas station, you need to understand there are multiple parties and multiple businesses at play in that single station. So you've got, if it's owner operated, you've got the person behind the counter that may own the inside business, all the beer and wine they're selling, the potato chips, the cheese crackers, insert whatever merchandise is inside the store. That can be one business. You can have the real property that it sits on, and someone can be landlord or own that. It can be in a different LLC or it can be a total third party. And that can be one leg of it. And then you've got the fuel side, the actual pumps that are pumping the gas, right? Oftentimes, you'll see someone own both the inside, the outside, the fuel, and the real estate, or you'll see a combination of it. So even in a single gas station, you might be dealing with multiple parties to tie it all up in a bow. So that's kind of what makes it unique. And then you have the obvious environmental side, right? You're dealing with fuel and you're dealing with tanks that are underneath the ground. And there's regulatory things for that. There's things that different states require. And then there's how to navigate that, right? Because unless everything is tied up in a pretty bow underneath in the fuel tanks, that can cause some problems too. And you've got to have a broker that can navigate that side of it as well.
Yeah, so I mean, your average gas station owner uh, really shouldn't be just going with any broker. They really need to be dealing with someone highly specialized like yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say if you own a single station to three or four stations, you should probably just let me take care of it.
Yeah.
And there's twofold. I deal with I've dealt with hundreds of clients at this point, And they all start trying to do it themselves and then realize, even though they may be kicking butt with their gas station, operating a successful business and or gas station is totally separate than being able to know how to sell it when the time comes.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to remind people of that often, that
Yeah.
you can be an excellent operator, an excellent business owner, but it does not make you the perfect fit to try to navigate your exit.
Sure. I mean, there's so many different, like you said, pieces and facets to it. Frankly, even if you knew what you were doing, it's difficult to keep it all keep it all together, keep it all organized, and really end up with the best result possible. Because yeah, I mean, anybody could theoretically cobble up a deal, but is it going to is it going to get you what you really deserve?
Well, and I think there's key three things to think about when selling a gas station in terms of if I'm the business owner and thinking whether or not I should use a broker or not. It's basically this: you might be able to achieve an exit without a broker, um, but really, how big of a headache are you going to have? Because
Right.
see, the broker, I get to be quarterback. I get to take care of. I get to field all the calls. I get to figure out the solutions. I get to work the problems, right? Where ultimately, at the end of it, you get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And 9 times out of 10, I'm going to get you paid more than if you did it yourself. I'm going to get to deal with the headache. And the speed of which I'm going to allow this to happen is a lot faster than if you did it on your own, because I have the contacts that are not just with individual station owners, but large regional buyers and the national wholesale jobbers. So it's really just a win-win for the station owner to allow me to broker the deal.
Sure. No, I mean, it makes a ton of sense. So obviously, we've seen in the last, handful of years some serious ebbing and flowing in cost of fuel, and the way that things sort of run. So coming into 2024, what would you say the current state of the industry is as it relates to what gas stations are worth these days?
Sure. So it is a very fluid industry. And it kind of always is, because there's that kind of hanging in the balance over here is what's the crude oil prices, what's going on globally, nationally, at the oil price level, and then you've got the inside sale level, and then oftentimes most um, station owners own the real estate that the property's sitting on, which really makes them in the real estate business, and they happen to sell chips or fuel. That's what
Mm-hmm.
I often like to remind most gas station owners, most fuel related businesses, that they're really in the real estate business.
Mm-hmm.
So why I bring that up is when the market goes down or moves or fluctuates, your multiple that you're going to get for that gas station goes down, because it's a lot of times directly related to the real estate piece of that, right?
Hmm.
Um, so then let's say, okay, Chandler, I don't own the real estate. I just own the business and it's kicking butt. Well, your multiple is still going to go down when the economy goes down or when there's a fluctuation in the market, simply because, like right now, capital is hard to come around. It's just more expensive to go to a bank. The lending options are few, which kind of lowers the multiple, makes it harder, a barrier to entry, right? With that, there are lots of things going on. I'm well aware of, just in the last 2 weeks, of $300 million of transactions being closed in the Southeast, right? So it's not things aren't moving, but they are coming down in price. So really, if I was a station owner, I'm going to tell you that now is a really good time to move. It's January, it's first quarter. There's new pots of money involved with some of these larger buyers, and we don't know what's going to happen later in the year. But right now, I'm pretty confident that you're still going to secure a strong multiple. Where if you wait, uh, you might, but I just can't guarantee it, right? I don't
Right.
guarantee anything in terms of a multiple outside of a month. So,
So buyers are still avidly seeking new stations.
yeah, absolutely, they are. I would say this though: the pretty ones are going to get bought first, and what I
Sure.
mean by that is where we were in a place the last 2 or 3 years where if you just had a gas station and you sold fuel and you had potato chips, you had a competent staff, and you showed up to work, that business was being sold at a multiple probably higher than you ever thought it was going to happen. Things have kind of right sized, especially in the southeastern market, so that the pretty ones are getting bought first, meaning you have to have a really good, solid operation. You need to have good staff in place. You need to have prime real estate, and those are being bought first. And so your A and B class gas stations are being sold first, Or if you've got a more rural gas station, or maybe it's older, or maybe you're not doing the volume those are, you're still selling, but you are selling at a less multiple. Or maybe that selling is being extended to several more months than it was even last year. So
Hmm.
things are still moving, but your gyms are going to sell first right now in this market.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So realistically, when we think about the factors that are driving the multiples, we're talking the pretty ones are not just getting bought first, they're getting a higher multiple generally. Is that accurate?
Sure. I mean that, yeah, that's accurate. That's across the board. That's in general, but especially now, right? Because what I just said earlier was where cash is being more difficult to gather, right? So you've got these buyers and they've got X amount to spend. That X amount may have been 300 million last year. It's 150 million this year. They're
Sure.
going to spend that 150 on the best stations they can buy. So where yours may have been grouped in if when they had 300, you may not make that cut if you're not having a meeting your margins, having a favorable fuel contract, owning the real estate, and making it an attractive transaction for someone to come and acquire.
Now, is there anything in the relative short term, let's say in the next year or two, that a business owner, a station owner that has a not so pretty station, are there things that they can do to sort of get a little closer to what would be considered pretty?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things. You want to have a favorable fuel contract.
Hmm.
Now, here's the issue with that. Yours might be favorable and you just signed it and now you're locked in for 10 or 15 years, sometimes 20 years. That's great because it works for you and you're happy. Then you better be committed to running that business for the next 5 or 10 years. Because a lot of times these larger buyers that are paying these multiples, they want the fuel along with the inside sales. In order to do that, you're then having to essentially buy out your fuel contract. That's costing you upfront money.
Hmm.
So you want a favorable fuel contract, whether that means you're in an existing one. And right now, unbranded fuel is the way to go. So it doesn't matter what you're flagged, whether you're flagged Chevron, Exxon, Mobil, doesn't matter. But if you can actually have unbranded fuel coming into your station, you're more attractive. A, for you, the margins are better. And B, someone looking to acquire you that's maybe a fuel jobber is just going to love unbranded fuel right now because there's more money in it.
Why is that?
Well, there's no third party, right? So
Hmm.
unbranded, you're going directly from a pipeline. They're getting a bulk price, and then you're being able to set the margin where you're not getting something from Shell or some of the big boys, and it's costing you pennies. It's just
Very
more
interesting.
margin.
Yeah, that's super interesting. You would, I mean, me where I'm sitting, I would think a major brand, there would be more security in that,
Now,
but
don't get me wrong. A unbranded station running unbranded fuel sometimes is a negative.
okay.
But there, you can have a brand on your canopy and still be running unbranded fuel. That's a really favorable contract. It doesn't always. It most of the time does not work that way. Most of the time, what is on your canopy is also the fuel you're getting, and they hold your jobbership. But if I was telling you, if I was renegotiating where I was, if I was a station owner, I would look at trying to run my fuel being unbranded. It's just more attractive for you and for a potential buyer.
Yeah. No, I mean that makes sense.
And then kind of the last thing that you could do right here and right now is look at where you are in your market, right? Are you a rural station? Are you in the middle of a city center? Are there no pizza places anywhere near? Are workers coming to you for lunch and you don't have a hot deli? Right? I tell it's a pain in the butt, but the easiest way to make more margin in your store is to have a hot deli,
Hmm.
some type of fried chicken, some type of something where your margins are 60%, you're staffing it, and you're able to that can boost your inside sales tremendously. So to me, if you don't have a hot deli and you think your station is large enough and the capacity to have it, I would put one in. That's the easiest, won't say easiest, but the simplest way to increase your margin is a hot deli.
The most straightforward. Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. What do you find? I mean, something that we've seen collectively as we deal with potential buyers, potential sellers. We see a lot of demand for buying stations, not as much supply in terms of the guys wanting to sell their station. So, what would you say to a station owner that has maybe a half a dozen, even a dozen or more stations, and they're really in acquisition mode. They want to bring in more stations rather than sell their portfolio. What would you say to a guy like that?
What would I say to them?
Mm-hmm.
Truthfully, I would ask them, what is your intent? So unless you're going to take that 12 store package you have that you may be absolutely killing it and turning it into 50 or more, then you need to heavily consider flipping that conversation and selling. And the reason is right now, the last couple of years and even into 2024, anyone 12 stations and under are getting bought out, right? Either whether it's big Circle K coming in, whether it's regional buyers, it is being really hard for small chains to survive. So the only two ways to really fix that problem, you get out and you exit, or you grow to enough capacity and mass that you matter in your market.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you matter in your market is hitting that 50 stations. And if you're not going to hit that 50, if that's just not something you want to do, then I would consider making those 12 the very best they can. Put in those hot delis, run those margins up, get it, make sure you're making 2, 3, 8 cents on your fuel side, doing everything you can and positioning yourself to exit. I know that's kind of maybe not the answer people want to hear, but you either have to grow to mass to matter, or you need to position yourself to be able to exit when the time comes.
Sure. So, I mean, when you talk about that sort of that critical mass being, 50 or more stations, I mean, how, for the guy who's got 6 stations right now, like what's the ladder to climb to even get to that point where you're going to have 50 like, is that, what have you kind of seen?
I mean, time, money, and energy, right? It's no different than in any other business industry. You've got to eat, live, and breathe it. Know your industry. Understand that you may sell gas, you may sell potato chips, but you are in the real estate business. Right. So you've got to find those locations that make sense, whether you're building them and you're just going to build from the ground up, which is very expensive. Right now, it's $4 or $5 million to build a store. A lot of people, even those that have 3, 4, or 6 stations, don't have that capital ready to produce that. And then you've got to right side, allow that sale or that station once built, those sales to build up takes 18 months, sure. Right? But if I had 6 stations right now and I wanted 6 more, you got to go find you a buddy. Partnerships are nice, or go find you a buddy that wants to get out, right? But it can be very difficult to go from 6 to 12, 12 to 24, 24 to 50. But you absolutely have to reach some type of mass so that you're not always being bombarded by the other guy. You want to be big enough that if Circle K comes down the road and hurts 2 of your stations, your corporate portfolio isn't killed, right? When you own 6 and Circle K comes next to you and 2 of your stations are reduced by 40%, you're in the hole. And you want to be big enough that you can ride storms out. And if not, you need to just be able to position yourself to be able to get out.
So realistically,
or be happy where you are. I guess that would be my other thing. If you're kicking butt and doing great at 6 stores, be happy where you are.
Sure, yeah. I mean, and that's in any business, right? If you're in that sweet spot, ride the train, man.
Ride the train in the sweet spot, because if you try to dip under and you lose that employee mass and in your your vendor reach and all that, or you try to expand and you don't quite reach it, and you don't know what you're doing, and you go, I found 12 stations in Georgia, but I'm sitting in Mississippi, and you can't really manage that, you're going to go under. Right. You don't want that either. So enjoy a sweet spot or reach critical mass.
Sure. Yeah. So, a question that we get a lot that I would love for you to address, in this time together is what kind of multiple are stations realistically going for?
Doesn't everybody want to know that answer?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What is my station worth? What can I get? So here's the thing. Before I answer it, I'll give you this, and I'll be real nice. And this will be probably frustrate some people. That range is 5 to 10. Right? So that's a pretty big range, right? Mm-hmm. So Chandler, what affects that, right, is the next question that everyone asks me. So your location, where you're located geographically, whether you're in a rural area or in an urban city, what type of value is just around the real estate that's around your station? Are you sitting next to a 500 unit apartment complex or 4 hotels or whatever that might boost those inside sales? Whether you have a hot deli. If you got a hot deli and you're making a larger margin, on the inside, you're obviously going to have a larger multiple. Um, Again, we're going back to mass.
Yeah.
If your EBITDA, your company EBITDA, if you own 6 stations and you're making $2 or $3 million at the end of the year, I'm going to be able to give a larger multiple than if you're making 250,000.
Hmm.
Right? It's also your fuel contract, how much fuel you're doing, because a lot of my larger buyers that are buying stations right now have got to have the fuel with it, and they won't even entertain you if you can't deliver at closing with free of supply. Right? It's got to be free of supply of a contract at closing. If that can happen, your multiple lowers just because who I can connect you with is less, and their buying power is less than some of my larger clients that want to control the fuel.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, 5 to 10. It's a wide range. Um, you're on the lower side if you don't own the real estate. If you own the real estate, you're going to get a larger margin. Um, if the majority of your portfolio you own the real estate, don't just lease. That's going to help. Do you haul your own fuel, or are you just a station operator? There's a lot of different things, because I have a lot of clients that are just single operating. They just have a single store or multiple stores, and they're just operators. I have clients that own and operate company operated stores while also haul and supply their own fuel. Of course, you're going to get a multiple there, and that multiple is different. You're going to get a larger multiple on store operation than you do on transport or fuel supply. That's just a whole nother conversation.
Sure. Do you think, kind of coming into 2024, like, are there certain states right now that are sort of in high demand?
Sure. I mean, right now, Florida, Texas, Georgia, at least in the Southeast, are in high demand. You've got a kind of a weird renaissance going on in Pennsylvania and New York. And if the deal makes sense, there's an appetite really around it. I would say the only one that looks maybe a little bit different, still deals going on, I just do very minimal, is in California. And that's just because they're up and down on what they're going to do in terms of how they feel about petroleum, and
Yep.
fuel as
EVs.
overall affects that, right? So I just kind of stay away. Um,
Sure.
yeah.
Very interesting. How do you, kind of, as we sort of addressed 2024 outlook a little bit earlier, but, what about with things that are going on overseas, Ukraine, Israel, what's going on in the Gulf of Aden, it's all these different things, right? How does, obviously that affects the crude oil price, but does that ultimately sort of trickle down to the actual value of the station?
Yes and no. It doesn't affect you as you might think it would. Obviously, if some mass something happens with crude oil prices, then they're going to be paying more for oil. Your fuel contracts, you're going to make less margin. All of that. The bulk of station owners' money is made in the inside. So does it affect it? I'll answer it this way. If something is happening so terribly with crude oil that it's affecting the gas station owners' prices, um, it's probably affecting the greater economy even worse. And that's really what's causing the issue, because then we've got a myriad of different concerns going on. So I
Sure.
wouldn't say exclusively prices over here happens, it's going to greatly affect over here. If something major happens over here, basically it's hitting the whole economy, which is causing the price to go down for your station.
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, everybody's in the same boat, right? I mean,
Right.
if
We are
crude oil prices
entangled
go up,
together, whether we like it or not.
right? It just, that's no, that's really really interesting. I guess it's more a question for the people that are looking to get into the industry, but not so much intra industry, right? I mean, everybody deals with the same stuff within the industry.
Hmm.
Um, that's really interesting. So as we kind of look at the actual transaction. So let's say I'm a station owner and I'm kind of I've got my stations in a position where they're sort of optimally operating, making good margin, I'm ready to sell. What are some of the post listing pitfalls that may happen in a gas deal? Like, what are the things that can put a deal at risk once it's sort of under contract?
Sure. This is the easiest, most upfront one. When you lie to your broker, right? So when you tell me something that is not the complete and utter truth. And what I mean by that is that understand that if a station is doing $170,000 on the inside, there are multiple manageable, different ways that people might manage that station. So therefore that cash flow is going to look different whether I own the station, whether you own the station, or somebody else. And there's grace given to that. We
Mhm.
understand that, but there are also metrics and benchmarks that if you're doing 170,000 in sales, there should be X amount of cash flow. And if there's not, you've been doing something wrong. You've been doing something not full picture. So I have to know. I would say the biggest pitfall is if I don't understand the full picture. If you didn't expressly tell me, Chandler, this is what it was doing, but this is why it's not, or hey, I take 30 grand out of the cash register a month. That's cool. Just tell me, right?
Mhm.
Because when I'm trying to value that, I can't add that nearly $360,000 a year unless I know about it.
Mhm.
Um, so that's one big pitfall, is that sales don't materialize to what you actually told me they were going to be, that business owner. Second is environmental issues, right? We get so in a hurry to sell our station that we forget to tell our broker or the buyer that, hey, we've got some outstanding issues. All of that can be worked out. In almost every state, there's a nice large fuel tank fund that helps pay the cost of when things need to be remediated. We just have to know how to do it. We just need to know that that's an issue. So sometimes that can cause an issue. Also, sometimes we don't even know it. You may think your station is in compliance. We go and do a phase one because the purchaser requires it, and then we realize, we've got some work to do.
Mhm.
Doesn't kill the deal, extends the deal, right? In most cases, it pushes it to go further. But those are your big things. Is your some type of environmental issue? Your sales didn't stand up to what you said it was. Those are my two things. I'm thinking of just the yeah. In 100 deals, I can't think if it doesn't fall into one of those two categories.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that applies to any business that
Yeah. Oh yeah.
particularly any business that list with us. Do not lie to us.
Yeah. Just tell me the truth. I can make it work most of the time.
It's gonna come out no matter what. But if you tell us the truth right from the beginning, we can at least make it what it needs to be, right?
That's right. Or, just so that we can set expectations for our purchaser.
Sure.
I don't want to, listen, I have made my money and my name by saying that I'm going to produce this. And when someone tells me that their station does X and it doesn't, and I've already had that conversation with someone who's interested, I'm the one that looks bad.
Hmm.
You know,
Right.
and that's just not a game I play. So, just your numbers are what they are, and that's okay. I can tell you what we can get for your station with the numbers that they are. You just have to tell me what they are.
Love it, man. I mean, that's makes 100% sense. Last question, or I sort of topic I want to talk through a little bit is the future. So we addressed a little bit about EVs becoming more of a thing, sort of socially, politically, culturally. Um, where do you see the industry changing much in the next 5 to 10 years because of all these initiatives, or do you see things pretty stable?
It's a guessing game.
Yeah.
There are some that will tell you it's going to look drastically different, right? And then I'm going to tell you that it probably will look different 10 years down the road. But big oil isn't going to roll over, right? It's too big of an institution, just globally. And I'll be honest, until we stop using fossil fuels to create the batteries they want us to use, what are we going to do,
Right.
right? Um, until I see, again, we're going to go back to talking about mass.
Hmm.
So when EV and electronics gets big enough that they have mass across the country, and that where I'm looking at more electric fill up stations rather than I am fuel, then we're going to change. But until then, a large industry that has dominated this sector for so long isn't going to simply roll over.
Nope.
Um, and until it's not needed, it's going to be needed. And I feel like it's going to be needed for the next 5 to 10 years. I do think it's going to evolve. Don't hear me wrong. There are ways to better take care of this God-given earth, and we should do that. But uh, overall, no, I think the industry is safe. Now, what I will tell you is that what I see evolving most in the industry in 5 to 10 years is this concept of going back to where most of the people in the fuel business view themselves as in the real estate business. They're
Yep.
going to position themselves with better corners. with larger footprints, with mini grocery stores, so that they're doing all these stuff and having fuel, so that when the day comes that fuel isn't a thing, they've got a model that still survives.
Yeah.
I do
Well,
think you're going to see a lot more things being offered at a conventional C station than we have in the past, because eventually time will come when they're not selling fuel out of those. So they're going to have that piece is going to evolve. You're going to see a larger footprint and more things happening on the inside sales, but it's
well, I
still going
think
to be a gas station.
right, and you bring up a really good point with that, because at the end of the day, we're talking about fossil fuels and what how how long we're going to use them and need them for. I happen to think it's going to be decades before that goes away. But even if it did, we're not talking about getting rid of cars. People will still drive cars, and whether they're filling up for gas or they're charging, that concept of the station
Yeah,
still perpetuates. And like you said, I mean, and most listening know that you make your money on the inside. So really, you just the gas or the electricity or whatever it is the hook to get you into the C store.
right. I go to my favorite C store or gas station C store when I want fuel. Yeah, when I need to, when my light's on. But often it's because I prefer the slushy, or I
Yep.
prefer the certain something I can get inside that store that I can't get somewhere else. Right. That's what drives me to a certain gas station. And
Mm-hmm.
whatever that mechanism they're selling outside will change eventually.
Yeah.
But yes, as far as the concept of on the go, we're going to be in a vehicle of some sort, and I'm going to need some type of snack on my way to the office, and I'm going to still stop at a C store and or gas station for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Makes sense, man. Makes sense. Well, listen, we're about running out of time here, so I just want to sort of make our plug a little bit here. We handle all of our fuel related assets through Robbins Fuel Advisors, which is our sister brokerage. But you can still, submit to list with Robbins Pellegrino, and ultimately, the deal is going to be handled by Robbins Fuel Advisors. But this is a one of the main industries that we as a brokerage focus on. And like we said in the beginning of this, Chandler is one of the few out there that is truly specialized in this. And, if you think you don't need a broker, man, just, think about all the things that could go wrong with the deal. Think about all of the headache. Think about all of the, golly, just the unneeded, pains that are involved in doing it yourself. And at the end of the day, are you really going to get the result that you would get if you use somebody who does this on a daily basis, who is used to whipping these deals? That's the question that I sort of leave you with. But thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you next time.